REWRITTEN! Stephen, please, don't do this, please, don't do this, Stephen! Someone was pushing on his chest, frantic. He coughed, salty water sputtering out of his mouth. The world was a blurred, mucky mess all around him, with pain hooked through him like a jagged spear. He felt like he was on fire and freezing to death at the same time. His lungs sucked in a breath and he choked again. He kept on taking the air in and out, letting it fill him up, instincts forcing him to let it bring him back. Yes, good, breathe, he's breathing! Someone announced, relieved. He could hear other voices joining the first, all panicked. The closest kept on calling him Stewball, achingly familiar. Please, Stewball, wake up, come on, you're okay! People were touching his face, patting the sides of his cheeks, trying to stir him. His eyelids flickered briefly, light and shadows of many faces staring desperately down at him. Come on, Stephen, they were encouraging. Hey, stay with us, Stephen, stay! But he couldn't hold on, no matter how much they wanted him to. His eyes rolled back and he was enveloped with the shadowed emptiness of unconsciousness again. Time passed in darkness. He was unaware of anything until he felt a warmth pressed up to the front of his body. He was clinging onto someone with the same height, the same skin, the same build as him. Their arms and legs were intertwined, chests flat against one another, like two babies in a womb, hugging them as they hugged him, not letting go. They were connected by the place where his belly button would have been. The other person was glowing pink, faint but constant. It was his gem. Why did you do that? His gem's voice was next to his ear, their heads beside each other, nestled together on their shoulders. Stephen couldn't remember much. He couldn't respond either. He only held onto his gem tighter, the warmth flowing between them. His gem shuddered in a sob, one of fear, fearing what almost happened. I almost lost you, his gem said unsteadily, its usually emotionless voice now flooded with an upset shock. Why did you do that? Still, he didn't explain himself. He couldn't. I won't let you go, his gem began to whisper once it was clear that Stephen wouldn't answer, over and over again. I won't let you go. I won't let you go. After a long, long time, he felt the sensations of the strange dream fall away, replaced by something from the outside, even his gem's voice fading as it was replaced by someone else's words. These voices were disturbed, low. Stephen, hello? Are you there? What's he doing? He's just staring. Is he okay? Are you okay, Stephen? And then, as if somebody had hit play on a paused movie, Stephen was awake. He'd been awake for several minutes, but only now was he aware enough to realize it. Only now, when he looked down and saw his hands, did he snap out of it. Because they weren't hands. They were monstrous, taloned paws. Hooked and scaled, his thumb a dew claw on his wrist, his palms long and fingers short, the wrong shape, the wrong color, the wrong everything. Stephen shrieked, the noise tearing out of his throat in an animalistic howl. Chaos exploded around him like he was inside of an erupting volcano, everyone rushing around, yelling. The crystal gems, his family, they were surrounding him. But Stephen didn't know nor care what they were doing, because now he could feel the scales crawling up his arm, hundreds of shards of dark pink stabbing into his flesh, taking over, changing, corrupting all over again. White butterflies swarmed him. He couldn't get them off, get them off! His talons swiped and scratched, trying in a flurry to rip the butterflies off, rip the scales off, rip his skin off. Blood began to gush down his arm to his elbow, sticky and hot, and not enough, get them off! And now people, garnet, amethyst, pearl, they were holding him down, pinning his arms to his sides, legs down, shoulders down, even his head. He thrashed madly, the terror too much to handle, trying to fight and push against them because he had to get the butterflies off. They were eating him alive. Couldn't they see that? The scales, the pain, what was happening? Where? Get them off! He caught flashes of the crystal gems. Garnet, her 3 tricolored eyes more terrified than he'd ever seen her before, all her weight being put onto keeping his legs still. Pearl, her paper-pale hands soaked in bright crimson blood, his blood, tears pouring down her face as she held his arms down. Amethyst, pinning his head and shoulders, her wild hair lashed and tangled in her face, her deep violet eyes releasing tears without shame. His gaze suddenly latched onto the image of his dad, too far away, a stranger in a white coat keeping him at a safe distance. His dad's face was wet and twisted with grief as he watched his son helplessly. Stephen screamed for his dad, scared out of his mind, but his wail soon became stifled as another white-coated stranger shoved some sort of tubed mask over his mouth. Stephen tried to shake it off, but it stayed firmly pressed there, and he was breathing in and out, frantic and tight and fast. Something new began to fill his lungs as he breathed, and before he knew what was happening, he began to feel a numbness muffling him. He breathed in and out again, slower than before, black splotches closing in on his vision, struggles weakening. The terrifying thought that he was dying shot through his head, and Stephen called out for his dad again, desperate. "Dad, I just want my dad, please, Dad!" The crystal gems still held on to him in fear of him clawing up his arms again, but the stranger with the white coat that had been keeping his dad away let him go. His dad fell to the head of the bed that Stephen was in, whispering shakily to him, "Stephen, it's okay, you're okay, I'm here." Stephen whimpered, feeling as if he was sinking down into the ocean, his thoughts subdued and shutting off, one by one. It wasn't much longer before his memory ended altogether, slumping off into forced sleep, his dad whispering comfort into his ears, telling him that he would be okay. He was in a timeless void of quiet. Nothing until a soft, delicate brushing to a curl of his hair, a consistent beeping noise to his left. The information passed by him, as he was not completely aware that it was really happening, like he was viewing it through an old videotape. He felt weak and limp and hungry and thirsty and exhausted beyond comprehension. So he didn't try to move at first. He just waited, unable to remember exactly how he got like this. Minutes ticked by. Something kept on beeping next to him. And then, at some point, his brain seemed to click on again like a light bulb in a dark room, illuminating it enough to make him realize that he should probably wake up. He couldn't remember what was happening at all. He just knew that, whatever it was, it hurt a lot. His whole body was in pain. It was in every bone, every nerve, every cell. He was only awake to register it now. He took in a sudden breath and shuddered, moaning. He squirmed a little, trying to get away from the pain, but that movement only made all of it flare up suddenly. "Stephen?" A deep, crackled, familiar voice, his dad's voice, said. The fingers that had been stroking through his hair stopped. Stephen tried to stay still, though that didn't help much. His head was still thudding, slowly trying to translate the words that he was hearing. He scrunched up his nose, his jaw popping as he moved it experimentally. He felt something hard and dry covering most of his face, like beetle shells or dried paint. Then his crusty eyelids fought against gravity, and with great effort, his eyes focused dazedly on his father's wary expression. "Hey, Stupol," his dad was smiling, but his red-rimmed eyes were tearing up. "How are you feeling?" Stephen tried to say something, but his voice folded and failed from lack of use. He only managed a pitifully whimpered, "Ow." Honestly, it was the only appropriate reaction to the situation after all that he'd been through. His gaze drifted hazily past his father, everything still very bright. He was in a clean white room, lying down, but not on the floor. Sudden fear surged through him as his lopsided thoughts strained to push themselves together. They were in an unfamiliar blank white room, and Stephen's jumbled memory showed him nothing from before he had fallen asleep except for flashes of sinking down inside of a deep pool, too far from the surface to ever breathe again. A strange dullness settled heavily in his gut. Am I dead?" Stephen rasped, still very disoriented. "I'm dead, aren't I?" Stephen's dad almost laughed, but explained, "No, Stephen, you're not dead. Nobody's dead. You're in the hospital. Are you feeling okay now?" He echoed what he said. "In the hospital." He could see what he was talking about now. He was lying in a white-sheeted bed, hooked up with various tubes to unfamiliar machines next to him. Things that he recognized from movies and things that he had no idea what their purpose was. He was able to identify, at the very least, a heart monitor and an IV. His heart was apparently pounding very fast. He was still trying to wrap his head around all this. His brain felt like a filing cabinet that had been dumped out onto the floor, with random sheets of information scattered around the room, all out of order. He remembered up until that butterfly nightmare in his room, whenever he looked down and saw something bad. then something about Connie, something about her being hurt. Everything after that was a jumbled mess. The last thing that he remembered, he had been sinking down, not making any effort to swim, too tired to even try, knowing that it was what was best for everyone. Other than those random bits of information, Stephen had nothing to go off of. It was like moths had eaten through his memories. Over the next few days of recovery, Stephen would regain his memories and be able to piece together what had happened, but right now, he knew next to nothing. All at once, out of nowhere, a desperate concern pushed through his chest. Without really knowing why he needed to know the answer, Stephen asked, voice raspy, Where's Connie? Is she alive?" His dad nodded quickly, saying, Yes, Connie's alive. She's perfectly healthy, actually. She's been more worried about you than anything." He relaxed slightly, only slightly. But why had he been so worried? Had something happened to her? Whatever it wasn't happening now. She was safe, that was all that mattered. He was sure that it would come to him eventually. Stephen was holding his head now, but became confused at the texture. Something felt wrong. He took his hand off and looked down at it before realizing that it wasn't a hand at all. "Stephen," his dad warned, following his gaze, "it's all right, try to stay calm, but..." His nails and the entire tops of his fingers were completely gone, replaced with long, hooked pink talons that extended far beyond his finger's original length. The backs of his knuckles and his hand, all the way up to the middle of his forearm, was coated in hard, overlapping magenta scales. In fact, he could feel the invading scales covering other parts of his body, tougher parts of his skin like his knees, his elbows, his shoulders, his back, his cheekbones, and even in a patch surrounding the gem embedded into his stomach. He swallowed, moving his jaw again, able to feel sharp, toothpick-like fangs inside of his mouth. Small tusks were poking from his cheeks, tall pink horns sprouting from the dark curls of his hair, heavy on top of his head. Stephen just stared at his hand, his paw, and tried to process what this all meant. He knew what those were. He'd seen them on so many other gems, but he had never expected to see them on himself. Eventually, he managed a blank, defeated sentence. "I have corruption scars." There was a nervous pause. Are you okay?" his dad asked warily. Stephen blinked slowly. His thoughts felt sluggish and sleepy. He noticed strange scratch marks around where his scales ended, some more accurate and some frantic and useless, like he had tried to tear them off. They were bandaged, but that didn't stop the red stain from spreading. He vaguely remembered that he'd woken up before this and discovered the very same thing, but he'd started to corrupt again out of panic. He connected the idea that he probably had some sort of medical drug in him that was slowing him down so he wouldn't freak out. And he wasn't. Now he was able to process it instead of trying to pull his skin off. But still, sleepy or not, what he was processing was still a very disturbing idea. Stephen's head slowly rolled around to look up at his dad, his voice trembling as he asked, "Dad, did I corrupt?" His dad's eyes crumbled and he looked away, flinching. His hand tightened on his shoulder. "Yes," he replied. Stephen felt a dull thud echo through his body. A weight swelled in his chest, too big to hold, crushing through his whole form until he lurched forwards, grabbing onto his dad, not knowing what else to do. They held on to each other, father and son, not wanting to ever let go, in fear of losing each other for good. I'm sorry," Stephen stammered, words twisting in shame as they snapped like brittle twigs. "I'm sorry, Dad, I didn't mean to corrupt." "No, Jubal," his dad squeezed him fiercely. "No, this wasn't your fault, it was mine. I'm sorry." Stephen was puzzled at that. He asked, What did you do?" "Nothing," his dad breathed lowly, the remorse thick in his tone. "That was the problem. I did nothing." "But..." Stephen trailed off. He didn't want to blame his dad. He just wanted to blame himself. "Look, Jubal." His dad moved away, though his hands stayed tight over his shoulders. He was meeting his gaze, his tired, light brown eyes swollen with tears, creasing with withering regret. His dad confessed, "I was a bad father, okay? I abandoned you. I was too scared of gem stuff, so I just ran away every single time while you ran towards it. Your health is my responsibility. I should have made sure you were okay, or at least check up on you more than twice a month." His dad exhaled, exhausted, like the weight of that had been building up for days. He bundled him up in his arms again and said firmly, "I am so sorry, Stephen. I'm never gonna do that to you again, okay? From now on, I'm gonna take care of you, and I'm not gonna stop until you're better. I promise." Stephen couldn't control himself or his crying anymore, nestling as deep into the warm embrace as he could, seeking every drop of the unconditional love that he didn't deserve. He was going to be okay. His dad was here. But he still had a lot of work to do. He didn't remember exactly what he'd done in the past few days, but he knew that it must have been a lot. He had to do something. He had to fix it. But he didn't know where to start. "What do I do now?" he found himself asking, his voice crackled like dropping pebbles in his ears. "It doesn't matter," his dad sighed, moving a stray strand of curly hair out of Stephen's eyes. "I'll take care of all of it." Stephen thought about that for a moment. It sounded so good to not have to worry about what was going to happen, but a part of him was still buzzing with urgency, wanting to do something, to say sorry some more, to fix it somehow. And his dad seemed to recognize the impulse. He distracted him with, "So, do you feel up to eating? I could go get something." Stephen only realized now how enormously hungry he was after a week of running around on empty and then literally turning into a giant crazy monster without so much as a snack break. His hollow stomach felt like it was being squeezed by stabbing knives, dragging trembling veins of weakness through every limb, and ow, great stars, it hurt! He nodded quickly. Yes, please." His mind began to roll away from that just as the words came out, facing the horrible mess that he'd made again. But shouldn't I..." His dad stopped him again. "Stephen, no, there's nothing you can do right now to help, alright? All we want to do is help you. Just rest, okay? You need to." Stephen couldn't deny that fact for a moment longer. He'd denied it for too many days already, and now he was unable to go on. So he nodded reluctantly, closing his drooping eyes as his dad got up to go get food. And he relaxed, something that he hasn't done in almost a year now. Rest. That sounded good. Good enough for now, anyway. The end of part 1. Don't worry, everyone, the rewrite is not over. We have just sort of reached a middle point of the rewrite, with part 1 covering all the action and the big climax with the corruption and stuff, and part 2 covering all the winding down and tying up loose ends and letting Stephen heal after everything that happened to him. Sadly, of this moment, I am not completely done with part 2 yet, but I am very, very close and am working as hard as I can to get it done in time. So, for about 3 or 4 weeks after Christmas break, there's gonna be a hiatus. Sorry, I know I kinda joked about this before, but now I'm more sure. I'm one person working on this all by myself, and I just need a few more weeks to wrap it up. I don't have an exact date when part 2 of the rewrite will begin, but it won't take more than 4 weeks after Christmas break, so please just be patient with me. When I'm done with part 2, I'll post a trailer for it in the nearest Tuesday or Thursday, and then start posting again with my usual schedule on Tuesday and Thursday. Very sorry about this. I promise it will be worth it. It's just taking a while because I'm determined to get this right so it can wrap up into a satisfying end. Okay, so if you have any questions, I can answer them in the comments. Thank you all so much for watching the rewrite. I can't express how grateful I am for all of your love and support. Seriously, from the bottom of my heart, thank you. So until next time, goodbye. Look out for part 2.